looks like we're live, and it looks really bright in here, even though it isn't. The sun's actually starting to go down. Anyhow, let's see who's around. I got the black t-shirt on, which is symbolic of authority. It's a prophetic sign. I'm kidding. I joke a lot about prophetic signs because I run into a lot of people who think everything's a prophetic sign. Hey there, Pastor Evangelist. Hey there, Jay Robbins and everybody else who just logged in. God bless you. Good evening. This is the Rift Online Church coming to you live from my van. Visit us at riftchurch.org. And we're going to discuss secrets of the prophetic life. We're going to share some things. I may share some experiences. I may share some of the things I know. And we're going to talk about mastering the art of prophetic disclosure. Because there is, I like to call it an art because it should be graceful. It should be beautiful. Prophetic disclosure is not supposed to be clumsy. And a lot of us are very clumsy in how we disclose things. A lot of us are careless. I know a lot of very careless prophets. Hey there, Dre Michelle. Welcome to the broadcast. But a lot of us are very careless. I know a lot of prophets, oh my goodness, they're ham-fisted and heavy-handed. Believe me, I was one of them not too long ago. Well, kind of long ago. That was about 17 years ago. Oh my goodness, was I heavy-handed. You know, I'll give you an example. There was a time, and sometimes I would release stuff just because somebody made me mad, and that's not right. And a lot of prophets do that. That somebody makes them mad, so they'll release what they know because what they know is disadvantageous to either the other person or will cause them embarrassment or some kind of hurt or heartache. So they release it, and because they were mad. I didn't do that myself, but I did at one time release something that I knew because someone had gotten on my nerves. I used to be part of a church, and at that church I was a member of the praise and worship team, and I was not treated very very nicely there. I was in the whole history of that church, I was the only member of the praise and worship team who ever had to audition. And but it went well. I started singing. The power of God fell in the church, and you know, I was like, okay, so am I on the team or what? But anyhow, hey there, Road Dogs Dallas. Welcome to the broadcast. And but the praise and worship team would give me a real hard time if I didn't sing loud enough, or if I didn't do what they wanted me to do, because you know it was a black church, so they expected you to do all this like stepping and kind of dancing while you're singing, and I'm not like that. That's not my style. And anyhow, not sure what you mean by Katrina is live, but they would in that church, because it was a prophetic, charismatic kind of church, and it was a black church. There was a lot of culture involved in the church, and please don't get offended by that. That's just the truth. Just like the Hispanic churches do a lot of things that are just Hispanic culture and has nothing to do with God. A lot of the white churches do. Oh, happy birthday. A lot of white churches do things that have more to do with white culture or European culture or American culture, so on and so forth. And a lot of what goes on in church is more culture than anything else. But in that particular church, there was a whole lot of culture going on. And so if you weren't loud, if you didn't scream and shout, if you didn't clap your hands really hard, that meant you had a demon in you, because you're not free in your praise. And I got tired of it that day, because I'm soft spoken. And we're going to speak a birthday blessing over you before this is over. Just remind me toward the end. Uh, But my goodness, you know, because I'm soft-spoken and I don't clap my hands hard or anything like that. I don't think that's necessary. Now, there's occasions where I might get loud, but it's not often. And it's not the things that make other people get loud. Like, I don't get loud praising God when the preacher's preaching. That's not my style. One of the few times I have genuinely shouted in praise to God was the time I read a book by Smith Wigglesworth, and he was talking about the loneliness of his call and the solitude, and I could identify with what he was saying, and for me that was a moment like, yes, somebody else gets this. And I was there in the church all by myself. I started shouting. So for me, it's got to be sincere. I'm not going to shout because the preacher wants me to. And so they were giving me a hard time about my soft-spoken ways. I finally got fed up with it, and I said to the girl, we got lesbians on the praise and worship team, and y'all giving me a hard time? Something like that. I don't remember my exact words, but I remember pointing out that there were some people involved in lesbianism on the praise and worship team. And I was not guessing. And here's the thing about people who are in sexual sin. It'll tell on you. It's like it says in the Old Testament, rest assured your sin will find you out. One way or another, it's going to expose you. And I remember a prayer meeting where the two women that I saw that thing on, during the prayer meeting, they were hugging each other while they were praying. And one of them, because I'm short, so I get to see everything. Everything's at my eye level. Everything's within my field of vision. If I was a foot taller, I probably wouldn't have noticed. And I was sitting down. I'm looking around. I open my eyes, and because I'm praying, and I look, and I open my eyes just in time to see them hugging. And it's not wrong with two women hugging, but there is something wrong when one woman has her crotch up against the other woman's leg. Like y'all are so deep into this sin that you don't even notice you're in that posture in church. So that there was an additional confirmation for me. So that young lady got mad when I said that. She told the pastor. Pastor called me into the office. One of the few times I got a private rebuke. I think there were only 2 times I ever got a private rebuke in that church. Everything else was in front of everybody. That wouldn't have been in front of everybody because it would expose the ministry. And he said to me, I hear you said there's lesbians on the praise and worship team. And I believe you're right. And then we had a little conversation about how you're not supposed to say everything you see. And while that's true, he was really saying it because he didn't want that stuff exposed, because the 2 ladies who were engaged in that sin could sing real nice, and they could move the people in their emotions, and when people are moved in their emotions, they give better offerings. So he wasn't going to sit them down. And he didn't want that getting out, because then everybody's going to know that Prophet Powell, who's so hardcore preaching about holiness, won't sit somebody down for homosexuality. As much noise as he sells about holiness, as much noise as he sells about walking with God and consecration and the power of God and holiness and sanctification and righteousness and all that good stuff, he won't sit you down if you're a lesbian, if you can sing real nice, and if you're giving good offerings and tithes. And that's a common thing. So that was one example of a time I disclosed something in a ham-fisted and clumsy manner. I was just like, I didn't care, like they say in Spanish, como caiga. Whatever way it falls, let the chips fall where they may. I'm surprised I didn't do more damage than I did. I would just tell people. Sometimes if somebody was lying to me and they had another motive, I would just tell them to their face. No, that's not the real reason you said that. The real reason was this. And they say, no, it wasn't. I said, really? What you were thinking. I would tell them what they were thinking, word for word, exactly as they had thought it. That's why I don't really have any friends. Because I would just call you on your nonsense. I would call you on your hogwash. But I didn't necessarily have to do it that clumsily. I was just really direct and really hard. And there was another time at same church. They were giving me a hard time again. And I said to the one lady on the praise and worship team, and the leader of the praise and worship team made eye contact with me just as I said it. I said, I'm the only non-fornicator on the praise and worship team. And our eyes met at that moment. I know she heard it. And she looked so scared. Like he knows. Yeah, I know. I wasn't guessing. Like, y'all are giving me a hard time? Y'all are fornicating. And so there were plenty of times that I would just let something out because someone was getting on my nerves. It's not really the right thing to do. So prophetic disclosure, it has to be done a certain kind of way. Now, I'm not saying that pastor was right in saying that it shouldn't have been addressed at all. He was just concerned about his bottom line. He was just concerned about people leaving, because people leave, money leaves with them. That's just how it is. But there's a right way and a wrong way to disclose things. Sometimes it's not time to disclose something. Sometimes you're not the one who's supposed to disclose it. Sometimes you'll see something and it needs to be addressed, but you might not be the one that's intended to disclose it. Oh my goodness, an apostle sent a prophecy proclaiming a curse if you don't marry her. We're going to remind me toward the end of the broadcast. We're going to pray about that. We're going to cancel. In fact, no, we're going to do that right now. Father, we come to you on behalf of our friend Social Aloe Ministries that has this so-called apostle trying to declare a curse against him if he doesn't marry her. Father, we come against that Jezebel spirit. We're going to call it exactly what that is. That is a Jezebel. I don't believe that's a genuine apostle. I come against that witchcraft. I come against every spirit that is helping her in her declarations. We call it null and void. I command that thing to be bound, to return to where it came. Let her have no peace. Let her feel no safety. Let any evil word that she speaks return on her sevenfold. We bind that curse. Lord, your word says that whatsoever we bind on earth, we bound in heaven. In Jesus' name, I also bound her. I bind her prophetic acuity. Let the sun go down on her gift till she repents. We declare this thing null and void, to have no effect whatsoever. And if she persists, Lord, let judgment come upon her. I hereby deliver her to Satan for the destruction of her flesh until she learns to stop committing blasphemy. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, some of you are going to think that's wrong. That's actually correct. This is someone who's trying to use a curse, the threat of a curse, to coerce someone into marrying them. That's like rape. Because you're trying to force someone to marry you, you're trying to force someone into intimate relationship with you, that might as well be rape. And the Apostle Paul was very clear about those who insist on sexual sin. Because if you're trying to coerce somebody into marrying you, you're committing a sexual sin. You are an attempted rapist. And according to 1 Corinthians 5, you are to be handed over to Satan. That's Bible. That kind of stuff makes me mad. I hate witchcraft in the church. But see, we got to disclose things correctly. And here's the thing. A lot of us, just like my pastor said to me, just because you see it doesn't necessarily mean you're supposed to say it. You see things in the church, what do you do with the intel if you're not meant to disclose it? We're going to get to that. Sometimes you're not the one meant to disclose it. Sometimes you got to pray about it. Maybe it's for you to fast about it. Because there were times, as God taught me and kind of mellowed me out a bit, I learned, oh my, you need to block that witch on all your social media and publicly denounce her and even declare her to be a witch, because that's witchcraft. Oh, Lord, strip that person of their ministry. That's a dangerous and toxic person for the church. Not just to anybody they come into contact. That's a toxic individual. But, so what do you do with the intel? God showed you something. It's not for, because sometimes it's not for you. You're not the one who intended to be the one to disclose it. It might be someone else's job, and I've seen that happen a lot. Like we've had sometimes prophecy threads that we're doing in our group, and I see something about somebody, but I don't feel like it's for me to say, and then somebody else ends up saying it because it was for them. It was appointed to them. Because sometimes, like it says, he reveals his secrets to his servants, the prophets, plural. Sometimes he reveals a secret to more than one person, but one person is appointed to carry it out. Just like you may have a whole lot of people in the Department of Defense that know the mission, but the general isn't the one going on the mission. He's sending somebody on that mission. He might have the intel, he makes a decision, he gives the command, but he's not the one to carry it out. And very often, and if you think that parallel is not valid, where the Bible says be submitted to one another, the actual word is hypostasis, which is a military term, means arranged according to rank. So some things, you may see things that are above your rank to deal with, and you're not supposed to be the one to deal with. So what do? You need to pray. Maybe you need to fast. There were times where God showed me things about people, showed me things that were going on in the church, showed me things that were going on in people's lives. I didn't walk up to them and say, you need to stop this. I didn't get in their face. No, I got on my face. I got in prayer about them. There was one time in a prayer meeting, there was the leader of the praise and worship team at that time. Everybody's praying in tongues. She's praying in tongues. But I heard her, and I understood her tongues. One of the few times I've ever experienced the gift of interpretation of tongues. I don't move in that very often. That was one of the few times. And I understood what she was saying. And I won't say what she said because it was private, but it was the cry of her heart. It was the anguish of her soul. And I felt it, and I was moved with compassion. And I wept with her, and I prayed for her. And I think I might have even gone on a fast for her. So I had spiritual intel. I had information. God had disclosed something to me. He permitted me to hear the agony of her soul, but it wasn't for me to tell everybody. It wasn't for me to walk up to her and give her a word. It was for me to agonize with her. Because the Bible says to rejoice with those who are rejoicing, mourn with those who are mourning. So sometimes that's what you got to do. There was another person that I perceived what their real problem was. They had serious fornication problems. Let's call it what it was. She was a hoe. She had this compulsion. She was a bit of a nymphomaniac. And she was living a double life. I found the double life was confirmed the day that myself and the deacon went to detail her car, because we would detail the saints' cars. Because there were times we were unemployed and we had nothing to do, so we go make ourselves useful. And we went to clean her car, and my goodness, it was a nasty mobile. I kid you not, I thought her dashboard was gray. It was not. When I wiped it down, the dashboard was actually black. It was covered in filth. Because she was also a smoker, and she'd smoke in her car, so it was covered in I guess, residue from her smoking. And I remember saying, I said to the deacon, I think I said to him, I'm gonna turn on the radio. Let's get some, have some music while we're detailing this car, right? And so I hit the button to turn music on. I figured it's gonna be a Christian radio station, right? I'm trying to say this without laughing. Come on, don't laugh. Be serious. I'm gonna do like Kevin Hart. I'm trying to be serious. And I turned it on. I kid you not. The very first words that came out of her radio were, "Shake that big old butt." I turned it off and I'm thinking, what kind of double life is this girl leading? And that wasn't, see, things don't happen by coincidence. Did you go there for that, to judge her? I didn't even make a single value judgment yet. All I did was state what happened. And my goodness, we're supposed to judge. See, you don't know the Word of God. When Jesus said, "Judge not, lest you also be judged," that was one sentence out of a whole conversation. There was a discourse there, and he was warning you against judging others when you're guilty of something worse. And at the end of that discourse, he says, "You hypocrite, remove the plank from your eye, then you can see better to help your brother with his speck." So you're supposed to help your brother with the speck in his eye as long as you don't have one in yours. That's the context, and that is the entirety of that discourse. That is what that discourse is about. Not that we should never judge, because later on, Jesus in John 7:24 says, "Judge not according to appearances, but judge righteous judgment." That's a command. That's not an option. We're supposed to judge. Because my goodness, if you believe we should never judge, you need to hire a pedophile to take care of your children. Convicted, unrepentant pedophile who says, "Yes, I want to rape your children. Now let me babysit them." And if you say no, you're judging him. Guess what? You're right to judge him. You go to court, you want a judgment. You got rear-ended at a red light, and you got hurt. You want judgment, and it's right to want judgment because a wrong has been done and it has to be set right. We have no right to judge when we're guilty, but we have every right to judge when we're not guilty. We have to judge in the church. Sin has to be judged. Sin has to be dealt with. Because by that logic, if we're supposed to never judge, then if you find out there's a man in the church that's abusing the boys, are you going to say nothing? You're not going to tell anybody? You're not going to police? You're not going to report it? Because you're not supposed to judge? You're just going to let him keep raping people? And that's happened. Because my goodness, the church don't care if somebody's good for business. There was a guy here in Canada, the pastor of one of the largest churches in Canada, was raping other dudes in the church. He's a big man, so he'd find some little dude, a young guy, who had daddy issues and didn't have a relationship with his father, so that he'd target those guys and be like a father figure to them, and then once he got them comfortable with them, he'd get them alone in the church, and then he'd rape them. His denomination did not take him out of ministry, they just moved him to another church. This light is making me look green, like I'm getting ready to turn into the Hulk. But, not the Hulk up here. But, so, there are times where we got to judge. But back to the original subject. No, I didn't go there to judge her. My goodness. I went there to clean her car. I went there, that's what I was there for, to clean the car, to detail it. And we did a pretty good job. I mean, I cleaned the vents. We used Q-tips, man. We were very detailed. But I noticed that. And then the deacon was cleaning out the trunk, and he found something. It was a lipstick. And he opened it. He didn't want to show me. And I said, what was that? He wouldn't tell me. And I told him later, Mark, every time you try to hide something from me, I always end up seeing what you're trying to hide from me, so you might as well tell me. He still refused to tell me, but I know what it was. The other thing we found in the trunk was those little mini postcards that they give you at the nightclubs. One nightclub called Kathmandu that's outside of Trenton, New Jersey, that apparently she was a frequent customer of, and she'd go there to go clubbing and to find people to get laid with, because that's the reason people go to the club. They go to the club to get laid. That's at least guys do. Anyway, so do women. But anyhow, so she was clearly living a double life, and that I knew what that lipstick was. The lipstick was when you open it up, is the lipstick part's in the shape of a penis. She's a bit of a freak. That's creepy, but she was living. The point is, she was living a double life. I didn't go to the judger. Now this person asked me, "Oh, were you there to judge her?" No, I went on a 6-day fast for her. But thank you for coming to that conclusion about me. I think I fasted for her more than once because I saw that what she was doing was wrong. She was living a double life, but at the same time, I was moved with compassion because I understood that she had a compulsion. She was in bondage, and she was tormented by unclean spirits. And I kept praying and fasting for her until she got free. So no, I didn't go there to judge her. Yes, she eventually got free from that. Because that same girl, they'd lay hands on her in the church, and she'd start doing this weird dance where she'd bend over at the hips and be stomping her feet and all that, and everybody would assume that was like the power of God, and the prophet would just let it. He would just let it ride. He'd just let it go, but he had to know, because I knew that was a voodoo spirit. That was why her problem wasn't fornication. Her underlying problem was witchcraft. She had been dedicated to a voodoo spirit at a very early age, probably as an infant, because her family was into voodoo. They're from Haiti. And so because of that, that dance they do, they call it being ridden by the Orisha. And Orisha is a voodoo god. And it has a sexual connotation. She would make these noises, like these moaning sounds, because she was actually having an orgasm. But they would all pretend that it was like the Holy Spirit. Because it was a spectacle. And a lot of preachers like to capitalize on spectacle. They'll know it's a demon, but they'll let everybody else think, oh wow, God is moving here. No, it wasn't God. It was a voodoo spirit. And I remember the day that the pastor was out of town, the assistant pastor tried to deal with that voodoo spirit, and she reared up, seemed like she got taller, and she was already tall enough as it was. She was like 5'11" and about 6'3" in heels. And the demon spoke, and I understood what it said. It said, "How dare you?" Because he didn't have authority to deal with that. And she grabbed his hand, he pulled away from her. And the deacon flinched away. Big 6'5" deacon was scared. And so it ended up falling to the 5'4", 120-pound guy to walk up and cast the devil out of her. But even then, I had to kind of do it sneaky like. I went and sat in the chair that was closest to her and told her to shut up and come out. And so let me just take care of this. People are asking questions that are obvious, and it's they're disruptive. I didn't go marching around telling everybody, oh, she's got a voodoo spirit. No. That wasn't to be disclosed. Now, if there were a few people who knew, they just didn't want. They either didn't want to deal with it, or they knew they couldn't deal with it. Some of them were scared of it. There was one man in that church. He stopped coming to the church because he ended up fooling around with her, and apparently, well, let's just say something happened that wasn't nice. It's a dangerous thing to go have sex with somebody that's full of demons. I'll put it that way. It's a dangerous thing. And but But not everything's for us to disclose. So some things you got to fast. Some things you got to pray. Sometimes some things you might see somebody, let's say they got a spirit of rejection. And my goodness, the church loves to beat up on people who got a spirit of rejection or who are tormented by one, because sometimes that spirit's not inside them. There may be a spirit that we could classify that way. That's not really its name. But that spirit is tormenting them and afflicting them in their life, maybe even engineering circumstances, turning people against them to make sure they are rejected all the time. And they end up developing a bit of rejection complex. But in the church, we like to rebuke those people. We like to pick on them. And you got a spirit of rejection. You need to get delivered. Dude, seriously? I've had that happen to me. The pastor told me I had a spirit of rejection. I said, well, how do I get rid of it? And he couldn't give me a straight answer. I was like, dude, either you don't know how to get me free, or you can't get me free, or you don't want me to be free. Because my goodness, if you really see that in me, let's cast it out right now. I want to be free. I want to be whole. I want to be upright before God. I don't get these people run around telling people, you got a demon this, demon that. Okay, why don't you cast it out? You're so high and mighty. But we're especially when we love to rebuke victims. If somebody genuinely does have a spirit of rejection, that means they've been through a lot of rejection. It probably means they've been severely abused. They've been through a lot of emotional trauma. The last thing they need from you, prophet, is for somebody to verbally abuse them some more. Now, there's some of them who will act up, and sometimes you got to put them in check, but my goodness, that's not the solution. They need deliverance. They also need to be loved. They need to be shown that not everybody's out to get them. My goodness. But by being hard on them, you just help their confirmation bias. Now they think, well, wow, everybody really is out to get me. Because even here in the church where it should be safe, it's not safe for me. We've even been through that. Those things don't have to be disclosed that way. And sometimes they don't have to be disclosed at all. What happened to the church that wants to pray for people? We spend more time talking about people than we do praying for them. We want prophetic declarations and, let's deliver this way. And it's not about, it doesn't have to be, deliver it the way God gave it to you. And if he didn't give you something express to deliver, don't deliver it. Shut your mouth and pray. Or rather, shut your mouth as far as talking to other people, but bring it to God. From your mouth to God's ear, like the saying goes. But here's the thing. The reason we don't pray, because I know everybody wants to hear about how to master the art of prophetic disclosure, but to master that art, you got to get your heart right with God. And if you want to talk about people more than you want to pray about them and pray for them, your heart's not right with God. Don't you dare tell me that it is. Because here, let me tell you something about a heart that's right with God. You're going to love people. When you see that girl's living a double life and she's got a lipstick shaped like a man's wiener, there's something seriously wrong with that girl. You don't go and beat her up. You don't go tell her off. You're moved with compassion because that's your sister and you don't want her to be bound. We don't pray for people because we don't love them. Bottom line. My goodness, almost a lot of people left the broadcast. Want me to tell you to spin 3 times and say Shondo? You want to master the art of prophetic disclosure? You need to be baptized in the love of God. You need to have genuine love for people. Because when you really love people, and I'm not talking the mushy kind of human love, I'm talking about agape, the love of God. When your heart is full of that, you're going to pray for that person. You're going to intercede. You're going to fast. You're going to cry out to God. You are going to get on your face and you are going to persist in prayer on their behalf. See, we think we're just going to pray in tongues for 5 minutes and get a 45-minute prophetic word for them. It don't always work that way. And sometimes the solution is not a prophetic word. Sometimes the solution, some things need to be prayed through. My goodness, in this generation, we want maximum return for little effort. We're like the guy that goes to the gym, wants to do 2 curls and have 24-inch pythons. We're like the guy that wants to go to the gym and he's just doing bench presses with the bar and he thinks he's going to bench press 500 pounds next week. It's not going to happen. We want we want huge results with very little effort. And guess what? My Bible still says, be not deceived, God is not mocked. Whatsoever a man sows, that will he also reap. You're not going to get out of the prophetic what you haven't put into it. You're not going to reap a harvest of not only accurate but masterful prophetic disclosure without a prayer life, without a fast life, without a life of love for God and his people. You want to master the art of prophetic disclosure? Learn how to pray. And not just how to pray, but learn to pray. You know, the disciples who spent all that time with Jesus, the greatest preacher to ever walk the face of the earth, as far as we know, they never said, Master, teach us to preach. They said, Master, teach us to pray. Not just how to pray, but teach us to pray. We miss that context. Because it's not just about a methodology. It is about praying, period. Because here's the thing you got to understand about prayer. Prayer will exhaust your vocabulary, like Ravenhill used to say. It'll exhaust your vocabulary. Don't tell me you really prayed for somebody if you haven't gotten to the point where you ran out of things to say and you are at a loss for words. And all you can do is groan before God. All you can do is weep before God. My goodness. I'm amazed and at times appalled at the lack of concern that we have for one another. Jesus himself said, the world would know you're my disciple by your love for one another. And we'll say we love one another, but my goodness, it's just too much to ask for somebody to pray for somebody. Let me close this window real quick. We got a truck coming. There we go. Yeah. This place is right outside a grocery store, so they get their deliveries of groceries. But anyhow, you want to master the art of prophetic disclosure, prayer is the bottom line. The prayer is going to be the foundation of that. Because, like Ravenhill used to say, I love quoting Ravenhill, no man's greater than his prayer life. Because it's in that place of prayer where you're going to have intimacy with God. It's where God's going to show you secrets, where God is going to tell you how to say it. Or God is going to mold your character so that that saying it the right way becomes your nature. Where you learn how to deliver things. Where you learn when is the appropriate time to deliver this. Because, like the word says, to every purpose under heaven, there's a season and there's a time. Just because you heard something from God doesn't necessarily mean that you're supposed to necessarily deliver it now. It may not be for right now. It may be for tomorrow. It may be for next week. You know, I've had times where I sat on a prophetic word for a couple months. And I told the person that. I said, I've been sitting on this for about 2 months now. There's other things I've been sitting on for a lot longer than that. Because it's not time to say it. And there's times I want to say it. But I know it's not time yet. You want to master the art of prophetic disclosure, you also got to get delivered from your ego. And this is a big problem in prophetic ministry. A lot of prophets got an ego. They're full of pride. And some of us don't even realize we have an ego. We're looking forward to prophesying because we want to impress people. We want attention. Some of us want to make money. You know, we want a platform in ministry. We want to get invited here and there and everywhere. So we want to prophesy for that purpose because, let's face it, the truth of the world of ministry is if you prophesy more, you get invited more. All right, Osar Kamal, you need to start your own broadcast. Anyhow, there's a little truth to that. You should be able to hear from God for yourself, but God's not going to tell you everything. My goodness, God doesn't tell me everything. And sometimes I'm a little upset about that. There's even one thing that God has apparently been hiding from me for 10 years. I'm a little mad about that, but can't really be mad at God, but I'm a little upset. But, God knows we're only clay. But back to the subject. You got to let go of pride. You got to let go of the ego. Because what does the word say? God resists the proud. You've got to deliver things with humility. I see prophets all the time. The way they deliver a word, it's like, my goodness, you can tell he's pleased with himself. That's not the purpose of God giving you a word. And then you got folks they'll get up and to deliver a prophetic word in the church, and they're done delivering the word, but they don't want to put the microphone down. Look, this is how. Let me tell you something, brother. This is how you're supposed to do it. If God gives you a word in the church and they let you deliver it, deliver the word, then shut up and sit down. There's no need for you to keep talking. Don't add your opinion. The last thing these people need is your opinion. And oh goodness, I've seen opinion ruin things all the time. Because somebody gets a word from God, but then they decide to add what they think. They decide to interpret it according to their own understanding, which very often is quite ignorant. Hey there, Ratisha, God bless you. Good to see you. You got to also learn how to shut up. Because part of the art of prophetic disclosure is knowing when to shut your mouth. Because sometimes we mean well. Sometimes it's not even about our ego. We mean well, so we keep talking, but God didn't appoint you to keep talking. You're supposed to deliver the message and then shut up. Because here's the problem. If I got a word for you, and God gives me a word, and it's a specific word, I can actually diminish the impact of that word if I keep running my mouth. Because people only have so much attention span. I might keep running my mouth, and then I kept running my mouth for another 20 minutes, and all you remember now is the last 20 minutes, which was just me talking and not God. You don't need that. So part of that art of mastering prophetic disclosure is you got to learn how to shut up. You got to learn some self-control, which a lot of people don't have. My goodness, I know some saints that talk about self-control, and they're always ready to fly off the handle. But you got to develop some self-control. You got to develop some discipline. And let me tell you something about that. God will, in most cases, will not exercise discipline for you. That's up to you. Have you noticed? God usually doesn't make you exert discipline. There may be some cases where God will force your hand, but in day-to-day life, that's up to you. So you gotta learn to once you deliver the message, that's it. Be done. Because you gotta let that sink in. Another part of mastering prophetic disclosure is you also have to learn what is the context in which I need to deliver this. Because it's not just a matter of when, sometimes it's also a matter of where. Sometimes you might have a word for somebody, but God didn't intend for you to deliver it in front of the whole church. As much as we like to do that, a lot of us prophets like to deliver prophecies in front of the whole church so everybody can see us prophesying. Or if it's an embarrassing prophecy and we don't like the person, we'll deliver the word in front of everybody because we want to humiliate somebody. I've seen people do that. Heck, the church I was at, the whole church was afraid of that prophet because they didn't know if he was gonna air their dirty laundry, and he did it to a couple people. Myself included. My goodness, like I said, I only ever caught 2 private rebukes in that church the whole time I was there. Everything was always public, with the exception of those two rebukes. And sometimes it was even stuff I wasn't even guilty of. I'd be sitting there like, okay, I know I'm not guilty of that. Um, some things were just guesses. Some things were just him being an insecure leader who had to put somebody in their place. That happens. People are human. And but that's another thing. You got to get delivered from you. Because if you're not delivered from you, if you're not delivered from your various personality quirks and your character issues, it's going to contaminate your prophetic flow. Just like that prophet who would embarrass people because he had to assert his position as the alpha in the group. If he felt threatened by somebody, he'd embarrass them. And a lot of folks do that. You got to let God deal with you. Because an accurate word given with the wrong motive is still, it's my humble opinion, it's worse than giving a word from the devil. Because not everything was meant to be disclosed. And a lot of times the stuff that we disclose because we're mad at somebody or we got a wrong motive in disclosing it, we weren't supposed to disclose it. And as one very wise man once said, if you got to justify what you did, you shouldn't have done it. Because usually when I address that with prophets, they'll try to justify what they did. Well, he said this and he did that. And no. If you got to justify, you probably shouldn't have done it. I can't think of a time where I've at least not in recent memory, where I've disclosed something. Once God taught me this stuff, I keep my mouth shut. I don't care how mad I am at somebody. I'm not going to disclose something if God didn't give it to me to disclose. Because there's certain conversations with God I don't want to have. And I don't want to stand before God and have to explain why I spilled the beans on something that I should have kept my mouth shut about. A lot of problems can be avoided just by learning how to shut up. The very first thing God taught me about being a prophet was how to shut up. Another part of mastering the art of prophetic disclosure is waiting. A lot of us are not willing to wait. Like I said before, we want to pray in tongues for 30 seconds and then get a 45-minute word. We just want to charge madly forward and prophesy to people even when it's not. We don't wait. And here's the problem with that. If you don't wait, there may have been more to the message. There may have been something else God was going to show you. And we see it all the time. Somebody gets a vision of a house and they think that God's going to bless that person with that house. And sometimes the house was a symbol and God was going to show you something, but you decided to run your mouth before God finished showing you what He's going to show you. A lot of times we're in a hurry. You got to learn to not be in a hurry. And I remember, and I'll probably close on this, years ago, it was about 11 years ago, I had this job. I was working as a field manager for a security company. And my boss had a long talk with me when he first assigned me as a field manager. And he was really talking about handling the company car because he didn't want anybody wrecking it. Because my predecessors had totaled the company car. They wrecked it 3 times, and the third time the car was just, they wrote it off. And so what he told me was this. He said, we're never in a hurry around here. Even when you're in a hurry, even when we're in a hurry, we're not in a hurry. And there was one particular road he said never to take. A place in Jersey City called the Pulaski Skyway. He said, don't you ever take the Pulaski Skyway. If you're on the Pulaski Skyway and you get into an accident, you're fired. I don't care what the circumstances are. If you get into an accident on the Pulaski Skyway, you're fired. So don't ever drive there. I went on there once, I'll admit that. But because all the other roads were jammed up. Sorry, Ralph. But there was a reason for it, because the Pulaski Skyway was badly designed. It's hard to pull into there. It's very easy to get hit, and there's no shoulder. You can't. If somebody's going to hit you, you can't swerve. Somebody, you get a drunk driver who's driving in oncoming traffic. There's nowhere to go. So, there was good reason for what he was saying, but the main point. So he wanted me to operate a certain kind of way, and he also wanted me to never be in a hurry. Because when you're in a hurry, you miss details. And one of the examples he gave was, if you're doing a patrol somewhere and you're driving around the facility 20 miles an hour, you're going to miss details. You need to slow down and do about 5 miles an hour. Because at 20 miles an hour, you might not see some guy that's climbing over the fence. You might not see a gate that was left open. There's details you're going to miss because you're going too fast. You think that doesn't apply to the prophetic? A lot of us are in a hurry. You got to slow down. And even in martial arts, they teach this. They'll tell you, and they teach it in boxing and all kinds of combat sports, they teach this. Fast is slow. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. When you're doing your training and you're learning the movements, you do them slow to focus on getting them right. And I remember in Krav Maga we used to do that, and we would do everything in slow motion to develop the muscle memory. And a lot of guys would still try to do it fast and practicing, and they'd always get yelled at or get get corrected by the instructor. He knew what he was talking about. Fast is slow, because if you're trying to do it fast, you're not going to get it right, and when you really need to use that movement, you're going to do it wrong, and you're probably not going to be as fast as you could have been because you didn't develop the muscle memory. And if you practice it slow, what ends up happening is you develop muscle memory, and you can do that move for the rest of your life. You'll never forget it. Like, there's moves I learned in Krav Maga. If somebody pulled a knife on me right now, I wouldn't even have to think what to do. I could get that knife out of his hand and probably stab him with it, or make him stab himself. And it would happen so fast he wouldn't be able to do anything about it. Because I practiced it slow again and again and again and again and again. You won't get it smooth until you slow down. It's the same thing. And it's a principle that doesn't just apply to physical combat. It applies to almost everything. It applies to art. It applies to music. You got to take your time. You got to wait. Because the truth is, most of us are not, I don't care how many people out there call themselves master prophet. I don't know a single one. I don't know one person that I would say that right there is a master prophet. I wouldn't even call myself that. I don't think I've ever delivered an inaccurate prophetic word. But I won't call myself that. Jesus didn't call himself master prophet. Moses didn't call himself master prophet. He parted the Red Sea, man. I can't even part my hair. So slow down. Wait. A prophetic word will keep. If God really wants you to deliver it now, he'll tell you. He'll make it clear if it's that urgent. And if he doesn't urge you to disclose it right now, wait. Pray into it. See if there's more detail. Make sure you understand what you are hearing or seeing or otherwise perceiving. Because you're responsible for what you disclose. The same way that an ambassador who's sent to another country is responsible for miscommunication. My goodness, we've seen this just in the last week in America, the White House. You know, they just hired a new communications director. And he gives an interview, and oh my goodness, the things he said. I mean, this guy was just foul-mouthed and vulgar and outright just obscene with the things that he was saying. Now, he may have said things that were true, but and the irony is just amazing. As the communications director, it's his job not only to communicate effectively and clearly and make sure all communication is going smoothly, but he also has to respect the dignity of the office he's representing. Which brings me to my point. Man, that's the fastest I've ever seen anybody get fired by Trump. But anyhow, and it was right to fire him. Because you gotta respect the dignity of the office. And the same thing in the kingdom. You gotta respect the dignity of the office because you're not representing you, you're representing Christ. You're representing the throne of God. So you better carry it with dignity. You better present it with dignity. You gotta respect the office. Always bear that in mind when you feel you must deliver a prophetic word. Am I delivering this with grace? Am I delivering it with dignity? Am I properly representing the office and all its dignity? The answer to that will tell you a whole lot about what you're doing and why. Now, I hope this was helpful. If it was, feel free to share it. I wouldn't mind if you did. And pay us a visit over at riftchurch.org. Meanwhile, folks, God bless you. God keep you. Brother Sam for the Rift Online Church, signing out.